Hello, hello, Dynamite fans. Hello, Captain Planet fans. This is a very special week because Captain Planet #1 is finally in stores. We know you guys have been waiting for it, and today I am here with David Pepose, the writer of Captain Planet, and he's been doing great. I mean, not just Captain Planet, he's been doing great work with Space Ghost and so many great series. Again, David, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, excited to talk comics with you today.
I'm super excited too. We've been hyping up Captain Planet all year, and now that it's finally here, like what's the reception been?
Oh, it has been amazing. Just really positive across the board, which is so wonderful to hear. I mean, I'm a Captain Planet super fan. I've wanted to write this book for as long as I've been in the industry. I've probably pitched this book to every publisher in the business. So when Dynamite announced that they had picked up the rights to Captain Planet, I marched over to Nick Barucci and Joe Rybant and said, "Well,
Cool.
I have to be the one to write this." So seeing people really understanding what we're going for, me and Amon Casalos, it's really been heartening. It's been a long journey to get here, and to see people realize that Captain Planet and the Planeteers are the heroes that meet today's moment. That is a really just a wonderful experience, and I'm excited for people to see what we've got coming down the pike.
So you say you've always been a fan of Captain Planet since the original, since it first
Yeah,
aired.
I grew up in the '90s, and you can probably tell that based on the type of work that I write. But so I grew up in the heyday of Captain Planet, and for me, I think it was one of those things. The original show sometimes gets a bad rap for being so firmly a product of its time, coming out in 1990, and also that its politics are perhaps unsubtle. And what
Mm-hmm.
I would say is, modernizing a franchise like Captain Planet, that's fun for me. I love doing stuff like that, and so that's not really a downside for me. And I think I'd argue the world has gotten a lot less subtle in recent years, and so for me, the thing that I really love about Captain Planet is that its commitment to its diverse multicultural cast in a way that's so organic, in a way that I don't think we've seen since the days of Giant Size X-Men. The fact that it tackles such timely problems like climate change and environmental disaster and the human greed that fuels it. And I think also that pop culture has caught up to it. We've pitched this book as X-Men meets Avatar: The Last Airbender, and so being able to inject these different bits of different strains of pop culture, that's something I love doing as a writer. And I think it just shows that Captain Planet has been long overdue for a 21st century revival, and I think it can really speak to a lot of challenges that we're facing in the real world today.
Really, really cool. Since I should have said since, but I wanted to ask: did you have to rewatch the series to like refresh your brain? Or
I
how
did.
much of
I
it
did
did you
watch.
remember?
I did. I definitely did a refresher watching key episodes, just to kind
Mm-hmm.
of like, for example, I don't think I'd ever seen the pilot, which brings the Planeteers together, and so that was very helpful for me in terms of figuring out how are we going to structure our origin story, placing it firmly in the real world. But yeah, it was nice revisiting these characters that I've known almost all my life, and just picking up like different facets of their personalities that like maybe didn't stick when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's the cool thing about Captain Planet in particular is it really is the Planeteers story. And these are not superheroes. They don't have code names. They don't have costumes. These are regular people like you and me, but coming from different countries, different walks of life. And I think that idea that they're so human, but
Mm-hmm.
they're ordinary people granted extraordinary powers with the five elemental rings of Gaia. That I think really makes them even more heroic in my eyes, is that they don't have the costumes and the code names and the secret headquarters and the matching uniforms to kind of hide behind or bolster their resolve. They're on the back foot. They are just as overwhelmed as you and me, but they're stepping up and they're standing up for what's right and coming together to do so. And I think that's something that's really optimistic and hopeful. And I think a message that we can all appreciate in the year 2025.
I love it. I had the question in my head, and then it went, and then
Oh,
it
no, no,
glitched.
no worries.
Um, so, So you brought him up earlier. Emin Casalos is doing the art for this. Was he your first pick, or was he suggested?
No, so it's funny. I was not familiar with Amon's work before he and I started working together. That magic came from our amazing editor Joe Rybant, and I think Joe did a fantastic job picking him. Amon, for somebody who is not a household name, I'm hoping Captain Planet changes that, because I think he's got all the makings of being a superstar. He's got a style that I like to describe as like Gary Frank meets Steve Dillon, with like little detail work that kind of reminds you of like Doug Mahnke or Frank Whiteley. And so he came out of the gate swinging on this book. I really, having a collaborator like Amon who really understands the vision of what we're trying to go for here, that's half the battle right there. And Amon, just a super talented artist. Not only does he do the big blockbuster action stuff in really interesting ways, it's the acting and the character expressions and the body language is really extraordinary. And so I think he's an incredibly talented artist. I love working with him. And I think when you fall in love with the Planeteers, a lot of that is on Amon's shoulders. You're going to see characters like, say, for example, Wheeler and Linka, getting closer together, or seeing, Kwame as this like very sympathetic, still reserved kind of leader. Yeah, you're going to fall in love with these characters, and Amon Casalos really did the lion's share of the work for that. So he's a tremendously talented artist, and I'm very grateful to be working with him.
Sweet. Do you get to like have a sneak peek of the art?
Yes.
At any point?
It's been great working. I'm very much in the room, from the beginning, as far as, Amon will send me and Joe his layouts, and he does his layouts in such an interesting way that he actually sends it. Mostly it's kind of driven by like negative space and shapes. He's not doing necessarily the finer details for the faces or the settings. And so seeing that, you really get like an interesting sense of the picture of the scene. Amon is so talented with his compositions that's all you need, is these shapes and the negative space to get a sense of what the story is being told. And so it's, I told him they're the most interesting layouts I've ever seen in my career. They're a joy to look at. And that's just the very beginning stage. And then as you see, him turning in his inks, it's just like, oh yeah, like this guy is the real deal. And so, Captain Planet could not be in better hands than Amon Casalos is.
Awesome. As a fan, is the storyline something you've always wanted to write for Captain Planet?
Yeah.
Or do you have a lot of talks about what the storyline has to be?
This is actually, I've had this idea in my back pocket for about a decade. And small bits and pieces have shifted a little bit just as time has progressed, and I've developed my skills as a writer. But this idea of modernizing the Planeteers by having them on the back foot, having them on the run from ruthless billionaire Lucian Plunder, having Gaia being kidnapped as his hostage. These are all things that were baked in from the very beginning. And so I've been dying to tell this story. And if anything, the biggest shift for me is that the rest of the world suddenly is making all of this feel very, very timely in a way that I couldn't have possibly expected a decade ago. But yeah, things like you'll see in issue 2, when the Planeteers converge on New York and they meet for the first time. Those were some of the original scenes that I had in mind when I originally came up with this concept. And so being able to actually write that out and then watch Amon bring that to life, it was a real trip in the best possible way. I've drawn from a lot of different kind of like pop culture influences. I mentioned Avatar: The Last Airbender with all the elemental bending, and that makes the Planeteers especially fun to follow. But issue 2, we draw a little bit from the first Avengers movie in terms of influence there. And watching our Planeteers have their first meeting, let's just say it might be a little bit more explosive than any of them had in mind.
Really, really awesome. How is it introducing Captain Planet essentially to a brand new audience? Because like you, I know there's plenty of OG Captain Planet fans out there, but how do you reintroduce him?
Yeah, well, I'm very fortunate in that I've already sort of done. This isn't my first rodeo with these nostalgia characters, having written on Space Ghost and my upcoming Speed Racer series, and so I think for me, the ticket, and I take a lot of inspiration from like what Daniel Warren Johnson is doing on
Mhm.
Transformers and what Joshua Williams is doing on G.I. Joe, is that I think if you modernize these characters and like really just say, okay, it's taking place, it's brand new continuity, it's using the storytelling techniques of 2025, you're able to have your cake and eat it too, because that way you're eliminating any bar for entry. You're making the thing as accessible as possible, saying you don't have to have watched a single episode of the cartoon in order to appreciate this book. All you have to do is pick up
Mhm.
issue one. But having watched a bunch of episodes, you're then able to draw in all the Easter eggs. That way, diehard fans will be like, "Oh, hey, like I know Lucian Plunder. I know like." And so it's a really nice synthesis. It feels a little like pop culture archaeology in a way, where the bones are there, and it does not take a whole lot of dusting to make them shine like new. And so I think the thing that I really appreciate is that there are diehard fans of Captain Planet out there who have kind of kept that character's name alive. But I think there's a lot more people who either might only know the character through cultural osmosis or only sort of half remember them
Mhm.
from their childhood. And so being able to say like, hey, like this is a book that like it's not, we're not shooting for anything grim or dark. Like I think it's more just grounded, to show Captain Planet has sort of grown up alongside the rest of us, but still maintains that spirit of optimism and hope. Um, yeah, I think the response to that has really been very very heartening to me, because I do think that if these characters have endured the test of time in the way that they have, there's clearly something there. There's clearly something core to their concept that is appealing across
Mhm.
generations, and so it's been really fun kind of trying to find out what that is and then following those threads, hopefully to their logical conclusion.
Awesome. Hi, Travis. I'm like, I don't know how many times you've spoken with Travis, but from
Yes. How
Comics
you
with
doing?
Bueller. Hi. Thanks for watching. I was gonna ask, like, is it also tricky to blend the classic elements and the newer elements, or does it just feel natural?
Actually, it's really helpful. Knowing that there are bits that you can draw from, then it's just sort of figuring out, okay, what speaks
Mhm.
to me as a creator, and what seems like it genuinely important to the rest of the mythology, and then figuring out, okay, what are qualities that stand out about some of these characters, or in the case of Captain Planet and the Planeteers, knowing that things have shifted dramatically since 1990 when they came out.
Mhm.
Our character Linka is a great example of that, in that in the original Captain Planet, she was from the Soviet Union. She was the conservative planeteer. Things changed pretty dramatically, even over the course of the original show, the fall of the Soviet Union. In the year 2025, things are very different. And so the decision to recast her as our progressive planeteer, that she headlines this eco activist underground punk band that's sort of in the vein of Pussy Riot.
Mhm.
That was kind of like our way of reflecting the world outside our window as it is today. So that's been something, an extra layer that's been really interesting, in terms of this book in particular. But I think drawing from that kind of pre-established continuity, that pre-established mythology, those are guideposts for me. And that way, like it's hard to run out of ideas for these characters, because like the material is all there. I see my job as the writer is to just kind of figure out like what's the most effective ways to connect those dots, and to
Mhm.
kind of to not necessarily, I'm not coming up with brand new continuity. It's just figuring out ways to kind of reshape and remix what we already have. And so, yeah, I think that has sort of been our secret sauce for books like this and for books like Space Ghost, is that we're able to sort of take the familiar but kind of give it a twist that makes it feel like new. And yeah, I think for me the goal is never. I always want to respect the property. I always want to respect what came
Mhm.
before, but not be beholden. I'd rather look forward than back. But I think we're so fortunate to be working on books like this, and like Captain Planet and like Space Ghost. There's such a wealth of material to draw from, that it would be almost a disservice not to. So yeah, if anything, it's actually been a big, big help being able to draw from the originals, and have that inform the stories that we're telling today.
Sweet. I think the last major question I had is, what do you hope readers can take from this new series, whether they're classic fans or new fans? What do you hope for readers to take from this new series?
I think for me, beyond the greater environmental conversation and seeing our Planeteers, they all come from different contexts of that conversation. Kwame being a farmer, Wheeler being an auto worker from Detroit, Linka with her eco-activist band, Guy as a marine scientist, and Mati, whose people have been forced off their land by corrupt lithium mining interests. I think the thing that really resonates the most for me about Captain Planet is the fact that no matter where you come from, in all these different walks of life, we have more in common than we are different, and that we're always stronger together than we are apart. The motto of Captain Planet is "the power is yours," and I think that is a core thing about our series, is that you can't just summon a genie like Captain Planet to wish your problems away. It really is. It comes down to people like you and me on the ground level, because that's where the stakes are. I live in Los Angeles. We had our wildfires. I lived in New York during Hurricane Sandy. Climate change isn't a hypothetical anymore. It is a disaster movie that we are all living in. And so it does come down to sort of collective action to make sure that this planet remains habitable. And that, and I think in so doing, we have to come together. And I think that's what I love so much about Captain Planet is it's all about empathy. It's all about building a bond and a partnership. And for me, I'm a big believer that there's always room to build a bigger table. And that's why I wanted to write this project so badly, is because I do think like a cast like this allows so many different people to be seen. And if that can invite more people to reading comics, to reading our comic or any other, that's icing on the cake. If that can get somebody else to hesitate for just a second and think maybe I can be compassionate towards somebody who's different than me, it's a win. And so that's what I really hope people take away from this, is this idea that we are stronger together than we are apart, and empathy towards one another is the strongest power in the world.
Couldn't agree more. Could not agree more. Again, that's all I had to ask you. In case this last minute or so anyone wants to throw in a question, please do so. But really, David, thank you again so much for being here, and for again just thanks for all the cool work. Again, like some of your recent stories have been some of our most popular books, especially like the ones with the Mark Spears covers, because we got a lot of Mark Spears fans. So it's a nice collab of his work and Iman's work and your work. So I congratulate you on the success of this new book. So.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. And for anyone watching, final order cutoff for Captain Planet issue 2, as well as our Space Ghost annual, is this Monday. So call your local comic shop. These are both excellent chapters of both books. So you definitely don't want to miss out. So call your local comic shop, pre-order Captain Planet issue 2 and Space Ghost annual issue 1. I promise both of them are going to be very important for both series going down the road.
Awesome. Thank you again, David. Thank you to everyone for watching. I hope everyone has a great weekend, and you're going to be on our friend Robbie's show in a little bit. So you guys want to see more of David, go pop on Pop Culture Philosophers.
See you then.
See you then. Thank you again, David. Hope you have a good one.
You too.